Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the first virtual ACWW conference to the South Pacific area. Welcome to everybody. On this International Women's Day, that's very fitting, as ACWW is a world organisation, and we work to help women everywhere. Firstly, I wish to acknowledge the Indigenous people of the land we are meeting on and pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and to any listening here today. So please sit back and enjoy our opening video. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to welcome the delegates, the society delegates, members from the South Pacific area, members from other areas of the world, including some of the ACWW board members and area presidents. Welcome to our Zoom conference, a very first for ACWW. Scary, but really exciting. What a wonderful start we've just had to the conference with the flag ceremony, the Papua New Guinea sensational national anthem, and that beautiful song of peace. What fitting words for all of us in this hurting world with COVID, unrest, and wars in so many parts of the world. On this International Women's Day, I welcome and acknowledge those online with me today, particularly ACWW World President, Mrs. Mogdi Peacock, my trusted assistant, Lynn Braco, who's right here beside me. Mrs. Claire Mann will be our guest speaker. Ms. Tish Collins, ACWW Chief Executive Officer, and Mr. Nick Newland, ACWW Policy and Communications Manager, who will be running and is organising and doing all the technical works for this conference. And last but not least, my travelling companion, Minnie. Minnie goes everywhere with me. So I'll now hand back, and I'd like you to just look at our Tackling Inequalities video. I would now like to introduce you to a woman who doesn't really need any introduction, our World President, Mrs. Mogdi Peacock from South Africa. Mogdi, I welcome you to our conference today, and I would like you to now officially open the conference for us.
Madam Area President, distinguished guests and members of the South Pacific area, and all protocol observed, thank you for your friendly words of welcome to this extraordinary event. I refer to this conference as being extraordinary, as you are in the process of making history within ACWW. These are exceptional times, and we need exceptional action. And by conducting this virtual conference, Madam President, you and your members are acting in an exceptional way. You also did well when you decided to conduct your area conference on International Women's Day. This iconic International Day is a significant annual event for ACWW and indeed the women's sector in the South Pacific area, as it is an ideal platform to celebrate the achievements of women in creating a society that is fair to all and addressing the issues that many women still face, both here and around the world. Reflecting on the theme for this conference, opportunities and achievements in the South Pacific, I am reminded of the selfless and courageous women of the South Pacific area. Women who worked hard and still are, focusing their passion, their drive, and valued time into pursuing a better place for their fellow countrymen and women and children to live. You know, I think the lifeblood of an organization is its membership. From the smallest branches to vast umbrella organizations and individuals around the world, and indeed in this area, ACWW and the South Pacific area rely on these generous and passionate supporters to allow us to invest in empowering women and helping children and people. Taking action and working with women resonates in the words of one of the world's strongest leaders, New Zealand's Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, who said, "Everything I ever thought about doing has been in some sense about helping people." Let us therefore be inspired whilst helping others to seek opportunities which will lead to achievements. Madam Area President and members, as I am looking forward to hearing your discussions and learning from your insights, it is my privilege to now declare the ACWW Conference of the South Pacific Area as officially open.
Thank you, Madam World President, for your very kind words, and for all those listening, Mogdi will address us later as well. It's now time for me to give my report. However, before we do that, I need the minutes of our last meeting, area meeting that we had in Melbourne at the World Conference on the 9th of the 4th, 19. Mrs. Braco, sorry, Lynn, circulated all those minutes to you and is moving those minutes. If somebody on the chat line would please second those minutes. Somebody come up.
Second, Elizabeth O'Dwyer.
Elizabeth O'Dwyer.
She's CWA New South Wales.
CWA New South Wales. Thank you, Elizabeth. And I will now present my report to you. So at the World Conference in Melbourne, Australia in April 2019, I was not at all well, and I would like now to thank all those who were so attentive and helpful to me during the 2 weeks that I was in Melbourne. I'm very pleased to report that I'm much better now and learning to live with my illness. On the 5th of May 19, Minnie and I attended the CWA New South Wales State Conference in Albury, where I spoke at their international meeting and then helped Lynn Braco, the State International Officer, conduct a workshop on ACWW. From the 16th to the 21st of May 19, Minnie and I flew to South Australia, where we visited Women in Agriculture and Businesses Regional Conference at Port Lincoln, then on to Mary Edwards, and then on again with Mari Lally for the CWA in South Australia's State International and ACWW Day. And this was a special day as it was the 90th anniversary of CWA in South Australia's International and ACWW Day, and it was held in Burra, where the first meeting had been held. In August 19, I was to visit Papua New Guinea with Mrs. Shanks accompanying me. However, because of unrest in the Highlands at that time, this trip was postponed until November. It was to meet with the conference organising committee, but most importantly to visit societies and purchase project materials for them in PMG, resulting in helping the local economy, seeing the goods purchased firsthand. We finally made the trip in November, when we were met at the airport by members from CWA Braco, who have re-established the umbrella group of CWA in Papua New Guinea. On our last day back in Port Moresby, we revisited and the reopened CWA Rest House and the meeting room. And these women are sending me regular reports on CWA branches they are opening, and the CWA PNG has joined ACWW as a Category 3 member. Their rooms are refurbished and are used by many CWA branches, and the accommodation area is slowly being renovated. From Port Moresby, we flew to Mount Hagen, where we monitored a project with the Mubaloo Women of Hope in the Bayo province. And that project was funded by the London office. This was for literacy classes and sewing classes. The men and women participants performed for us and told us of their pride now in being able to read and write. Mubaloo Women of Hope have expanded this project and are doing excellent work with adults as well as people with both physical and mental disabilities. While there, I presented school uniforms and books to the small school, and these were donated by a little small Nanga school only about 15 kilometres from me. They heard me when I spoke about Papua New Guinea, and they wanted to help. So they gave me money and all their school uniforms because they had just changed to a new uniform. The following 2 days were spent with members from Change for Life, CWA Jawaka, Mubaloo Women of Hope, and Voice for Change. And I purchased and paid for sewing machines, rolls of material, school books, pencils, chalks, etc. Paid for 2 water tanks and $1,000 worth of seeds. We also visited the CWA preschool at Mount Hagen and gave them books and Australian stuffed toys. We visited Jawaka and met with the members of Change for Life, and CWA discussed the area conference. In October, Minnie and I flew to London for the area president's meeting and board meeting. And on the 21st of November, Minnie and I flew to Wellington in New Zealand for the Rural Women New Zealand Summit. Summer of 2020, Australia experienced horrific bushfires, and I spent days cooking and delivering food to firefighters, and then had 3 days volunteering in an evacuation centre in Wagga Wagga as I'm the team leader for Anglicare Disaster Recovery. At the end of January, Peter and I spent 2 weeks in Bali with my sister and her husband, and we had a lovely time. However, we came home and COVID hit us all, and we all went into lockdown. I have been most fortunate living in the country on a property, as COVID has not crept into our area at all. We've been very diligent and careful and have not travelled to any cities or places where there have been outbreaks. On Anzac Day, that was cancelled this year everywhere, I still ventured very early into town and laid a wreath, as I always do, for CWA and ACWW. Everything for 2020 was cancelled, and this conference was again put off until now. This could not be helped, and it had to happen within my 3-year term. And with the Australian government telling us that we weren't flying anywhere from Australia, this had to be held virtually and on International Women's Day, which is very fitting, seeing as ACWW is an international association. I've sat through numerous Zoom meetings, webinars and team meetings. Our board and area president meetings have been online, as have every other organisation I'm in, and most of you as well, I'm sure. Today, it is Tish and Nick's turn to stay up late, and Mogdi stay up late and early in the morning, and I thank them for this. In September and October last year, Minnie and I spoke with a Rotary Club, a Probus Club, a CWA branch, and opened and was guest speaker at the Murrumbidgee Lachlan CWA group. Minnie did her usual blurb about needing money for hair transplant operations, and she's got the lovely hair. I hope you can all see it. Beautiful hair now. However, she now needs money for her school fees and excursions, as she started kindergarten at the beginning of February and is loving it. However, it's awfully expensive. So I do hope you will all be very generous towards the costs of her education, so much dearer than when my two started school. It's not been an easy time for any of us, and raising money for ACWW has been very difficult because we were all unable to fundraise, especially with our main money spinner, and that's usually catering. Could I suggest that perhaps you put aside in a jar or a tin, maybe just $1 or $2 a week, or more if you want, so that at the end of the year or half yearly, you could send that money to me to head office in London or to your state head office for pennies, the Enabling Fund. I would like to say a big thank you to those who save foreign coins and notes for the Enabling Fund, or pennies. And I received $1,980 from Mrs. Broco for pennies last month after I'd ended the finances. I would also like to acknowledge those who send stamps to me for use at the discretion of the Area President's Fund, and those have come from CWA in Tasmania, Women in Agriculture and Business in South Australia, CWA Western Australia, CWA New South Wales, CWA in South Australia, and CWA in Tasmania and Victoria, sorry. I sell these to a man who's only about 65 kilometres away, and in the last 2 years, I've raised $1,000 since 2019. He said to thank the CWA ladies from him. Last week, he gave me another $130. Belconnen CWA also raised $492.05 selling stamps. I'm sure you have all heard by now that there is to be a special World Conference online next month to discuss and vote on changing the ACWW Constitution to allow the World Conference to be postponed for 12 months. And I think our World President may address that in her report. I was hoping to visit Timor-Leste last year, but COVID didn't let that happen. There are 2 societies there that I know of. However, they receive all correspondence that every society does, but they're not responding or asking for help of any kind. Also, Christmas Island. So does anybody out there have a good contact for me, particularly for Christmas Island? I'm sorry to advise that little Eva Wagapoo, who a lot of you would know from the Solomon Islands, passed away last year. And though she worked for the government, she also looked after the women's savings groups. The government advised me of her death and said that they would continue looking after the women's groups. However, they also advised that I or the ACWW cannot say who or what group would get that money. So I'm concerned about that and I need to communicate more with them. One of the groups sent me a proposal. However, the government said that they would not necessarily get that money if I sent it. They would give it to who they prioritise. So that's an ongoing problem for me to try to sort out. Our theme for this conference, Opportunities and Achievements in the South Pacific, I think shows through the reports from the societies and especially the island societies, just how the women can achieve through the opportunities given to them by the Australian and New Zealand members particularly. I've seen firsthand and read many reports with photographs from those societies showing the results and the ongoing work carried out by women with funding for projects. It's amazing how so little can do so much, and I encourage you all to continue to give so that that good work can continue to be carried out. I would also like to thank all the staff in head office who have been in lockdown for almost a year now. They're all working from home and still help and return emails almost immediately. We've had board meetings and area president meetings via Teams where we can still at least see each other. I would also to thank my lovely assistant, Lynn Braco, who is always at the end of a telephone. And then my husband, Peter. He puts up with all the calls, emails, and me being out or away or on the computer. And I would also like to thank however many of you are out there, 99, we need at least one more for 100, who are out there watching this conference at the moment. Thank you for joining in. I know for many it's probably your first time. We've got the 100. In closing, I pray that we will be able to meet face to face in the near future, and I wish each and every one of you good health and safety. And worry is like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but it doesn't get you anywhere. And you may give without loving, but you cannot love without giving. Would somebody please? Oh, sorry, yes. I now need to give you my financial report as well. I've told you about Melbourne and how I feel, so that's good. Mm-hmm. And I've told you the societies I've been through too, so I won't go on through that. Although there was no travel, I was still able to fund projects on your behalf to societies, a number of societies in Papua New Guinea, Kiribati and Tonga. Having to postpone the conference and eventually turning it into a Zoom conference had its problems, with hundreds of emails and registrations having to be returned. Some members were very gracious and left money in the account to help cover costs associated with the Zoom conference, and some wanted their money put to projects. The conference amount looks very healthy. However, money still has to go towards the cost of this conference, and there are still a number of refund checks not banked. And I haven't put them in there as unpresented checks because I don't know if they're unpresented checks, whether the members are not going to cash those or come back to me. And as usual, there were a few deposits with no names or numbers to identify the deposits. So I'm hoping that those couple will contact me. Towards the end of 2020, I told you about speaking to Probus and all those other people and how much money Minnie raised. The accounts show what has come in and gone out. I need to clarify just one amount of $200 from rural Rimmen, New Zealand on the 20th of November 19. These figures were put on the website, and I've been informed since then that money came from Rimanui in New Zealand. It wasn't the head office, or came through the head office, but it was from Rimanui, and I hope I've pronounced that right. I've changed the book entry, but I can't change the web page. Perhaps Nick can for me later. I again thank Mr. Richard Medcalf for auditing the books for me. He really is amazing. I was having trouble because there were pages and pages this time. And I was having trouble balancing, and he calmly walked me through the figures and found the outstanding amount for me. Again, his payment is really good. I gave him eggs, cooked him a cake, a fruit loaf, slice, and a ham and vegetable pie. And I've since given him a zucchini and walnut loaf, as this return was a mammoth one. I would also like to thank Lynn again and Helen Sheridan. Lynn and Helen are my two co-signers for the cheques that I need to write. And Helen and I almost had writer's cramp after having to sign and write all the cheques for the refunds. I would also like to thank those members who donated towards this conference and those who have left money in the account to help with the costs of running and towards the costs of the next conference. We don't know yet how much this will be. However, it will show in the next report, and whatever is left over will be a good start for the next conference and the next area president. There are still cheques not cashed, as I said, and I didn't put them in, as I said before, as unpresented. 3 have been deposited since the close-off date, and 2 more registrations have been paid out. So, yeah, it's ongoing. So I'd like to move the adoption of this report and would like to nominate again Mr. Richard Medcalf as the auditor for the following 2 years. And would somebody please, on the chat box, go in and second this report for me? And are there any questions coming through on the chat box, Lynn,
Not yet.
about the reports?
No, just trying to get- Okay, we have.
And while Lynn's looking that up, I'd like to apologise for the last page on that report. I don't know what happened with the lines on my...
Bronwyn Dunstan was the first one to say that.
Bronwyn Dunstan, thank you very much, Bronwyn.
And Wendy McGowan also.
And Wendy from New Zealand. Thank you, Wendy McGowan. Okay. So now where were we up to? So if anybody does, I notice that there are questions and chats coming in. If you have any questions or chats, Lynn and Nick are trying to answer those for you. They will come up on the screen if they can. If not, they will be answered on the web page.
And your full report of the financials.
And a full report of the financials are on the web page. They were put on last month for everybody to have a look at. And you can get back to me after as well if you have any questions on that. So I will now ask Nick. He's got a capacity building projects clip for us to have a look at. So Nick, back to you. Thank you.
ACWW has been funding women-led, small-scale rural development projects for more than 40 years. We partner with local delivery organisations to ensure that we always invest in local solutions to local challenges. But we also recognise the importance of reflecting on the lessons that we can learn along the way. Having invested more than £4 million
It now gives me pleasure to reintroduce our World President, Mrs. Mogdi de Kock, and she's going to address us. I don't think Mogdi needs any further introduction. You all, I hope, get her newsletters, and I do hope that a lot of you have been sitting in on her afternoon tea chats. So over to you. Thank you, Madam World President.
Well, good morning. It seems like only yesterday when I was granted the privilege to attend the previous area conference in New Plymouth, New Zealand. And what a wonderful event it was. It was a huge disappointment when I learned that it was not possible for this area conference to take place in Papua New Guinea, as I was looking forward to visiting this beautiful island of biological diversity and immense culture and friendly people. However, it gives me great pleasure, and it is indeed an honor to address this conference and to meet with you in a virtual space, giving me the opportunity to congratulate you on an appropriate theme reflecting many and successful opportunities and achievements within the South Pacific. Conducting a virtual conference is an achievement in itself. It bears witness to an area president who does not hesitate to seize an opportunity to show leadership by exposing her area members to new and unfamiliar experiences to keep up with the challenges of a changing world. Opportunities to empower women of this area presented itself many years ago when national councils of women from Australia and New Zealand were among the 21 countries represented at the International Conference in 1929 that led to the establishment of the Associated Countrywomen of the World. Over the years, many more remarkable achievements followed. 4 world presidents were elected from this area. And I celebrate and I appreciate the work of these leaders who contributed to the heritage of ACWW. A number of devoted members have been and are currently serving on specified committees, assisting the Board of Trustees to implement strategies. 5 triennial world conferences have been successfully hosted in the South Pacific, with Australia, Tasmania, and New Zealand as hosts. This area is one of the areas with the highest number of ACWW membership, both individuals and member societies who work diligently to forward the work of ACWW. Members generously donate to project funding, but also supporting the Enabling Fund of ACWW with their generous contributions to Pennies for Friendship. And I thank you for that. When I look at the selfless and courageous women of the South Pacific area, who are working hard to focus their passion, drive, and value time into pursuing a better place for everyone, I can only admire them for living up to the challenges. The uncertainty of the impact of the pandemic also prevents us to continue with our plans for the 30th Triennial World Conference, which was scheduled to take place in 2022. Therefore, as your area president already mentioned, notice has been given by the Board of Trustees to convene a special World Conference to virtually take place in April, to present a resolution seeking the approval of our members to postpone the next Triennial World Conference until 2023. Information regarding the resolution, as well as the online voting process of this special World Conference, has been sent to the membership, and it is also published on our website. Please visit the website or contact Central Office should you need any more information on this event. New technologies are not only transforming our lives, but also provide us with new opportunities to stay connected through challenging and unprecedented times. Since March last year, I am unable to attend all ACWW conferences or other face-to-face events, preventing me from meeting and connecting with my members. Therefore, 2 months ago, I came up with a plan to replace my regular e-newsletters with a monthly virtual afternoon tea, which is very well received, and I am grateful for many members from this particular area who joined me for a virtual cup of tea and a chat. And I'm grateful for the technical assistance from our very competent office staff for making this possible. So please accept my kind invitation to the next virtual visit, which will be on the 19th of March. I'm using these online events not only to promote the work of ACWW, but also to inform our members of the many opportunities where ACWW is engaging with global actions, playing a major role to represent its members, but also to speak on behalf of rural women and children whose voices are seldom heard. An example of such an opportunity to represent rural women is taking place next week, when ACWW will be hosting an online parallel event at the UN meeting of the Commission on the Status of Women in New York, when, and this is the theme, the role of rural women in global citizenship will be addressed. In collaboration with our UN Chairman, Marie Kenny, our Policy and Communications Manager, Nick Newland's application for ACWW to host this event was successful. A panel of highly qualified speakers will participate in this event. One being the current president of Rural Women New Zealand, Jill Naylor. If you have not registered for this event, which is taking place within 10 days, please visit the ACWW website for complete and clear information relating to this opportunity on how to participate in an event which has been in the past reserved for a selected number of ACWW representatives only. Well, while I'm directing you to the ACWW website, please find the appeal to secure ACWW for future generations, and please consider a donation. ACWW really needs the additional income, as the impact of the pandemic also reflects negatively on the general income of our organization, as is the case for many other voluntary organizations worldwide. Celebrating International Women's Day presents us with an opportunity to join voices with people around the world and shout our message for equal rights. And we should actually shout it loud and clear. Women's rights are human rights. It is also up to us to recognize the inspirational women in our lives and to celebrate their contribution to making a difference to the lives of women and girls. I was moved when I read about the remarkable contributions of Sarah Aoda Todd, originally from Port Moresby in Papua New Guinea, who is the founder of Arise Women, an organization that fights against violence affecting women and girls. And when I listened to a recorded interview with our guest speaker, Claire Mahon, by the Rotorua Daily Post, I was impressed how, without any hesitation, she declared, "Helping communities to thrive and prosper is my passion." Looking forward to listening to you a little later, Claire. Today we celebrate all women in all their diversities. We celebrate those who came before us, those who stand beside us, and those who will come after. International Women's Day is indeed an opportunity to celebrate the achievements of women, whether social, political, economic, or cultural, irrelevant of their background and age, as Malala Yousafzai, her name is actually Malala Yousafzai, and Greta Thunberg have demonstrated clearly that they can lead campaigns and create change, enabling a better and healthier future for other young women. Women have come a long way since that conference in 1910, and many people believe that most of the battles have already been won for women. But according to the International Women's Day website, women in general are still not getting equal pay. There are lower proportions of women to men in government positions, and women's education is still being withheld across the world. Battles have been won, but the battles aren't over yet. There is a growing evidence, according to the Executive Director of UN Women, that the pandemic has hit women harder than men. as a result of the unbalanced distribution of unpaid care and domestic tasks. All too often, women take charge of homeschooling, elderly care, and other work created by stay-at-home orders at the expense of their own employment. Madam Area President, I attentively read the reports from your societies, and it is clear your members understood and embraced the theme of this conference, as they achieved many successes when they, according to the reports, identified and acted upon numerous opportunities. Orison Swett Marden said, "Opportunities are all around us. There is power lying latent everywhere, waiting for the observant eye to discover it." Looking at the proposed resolutions for this conference, it is clear that these are embedded in the pursuit of your societies to use all opportunities to achieve progress for ACWW and its membership. These are exceptional times. We need exceptional actions to secure ACWW for future generations. This year, we should look for hope in new places, in the resilience of our communities, the power of our collective actions, and the unyielding courage of all those fighting for a better future. Please be reminded of the wisdom of William Arthur Ward when he said, "Opportunities are like sunrises. If you wait too long, you miss them." Therefore, members of the South Pacific area, when leaving this conference, be inspired with the assurance you have the knowledge, you have a voice, and you have an organization. Let us not delay and miss opportunities to achieve our goals. I wish you well in forwarding your work by building on the strength of women as the center of a strong community. You are all stakeholders and role players, from the humblest to the highest functionary, and the generations of members who make this organization into a thriving institution. I would like to leave you with a quote from an anonymous poet who celebrated strong women. "Here's to strong women. May we know them. May we be them. May we raise them." Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam World President, for that wonderful address. As always, I just love listening to your presentations, and I do thank you sincerely, Mogdi. Before I go on, Lynn and Nick are taking questions and answering as they can, but I'll just answer one verbally. Linda Roberts asked if we could put headings on the columns for the accounts. I just assumed, and I shouldn't assume anything, that the left-hand column on the right-hand sides of the page are debits and the right-hand sides are credits, and the bottom in bold is the credit balance of each account. However, I will do that in future for those who don't understand that. I'm sorry. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Ms. Claire Mahon. Ms. Mahon lives in Wellington, New Zealand, having returned after a long spell with the United Nations in Geneva. Claire is a member of the Rotary Club for Global Action and a human rights defender and advocate who has worked in more than 40 countries around the world. With specialism in international law, She has spent 2 decades working with international organisations such as the United Nations and Amnesty International. She also consults and advises world leaders on human rights, and I have much pleasure now to introduce you to Ms. Claire Mann. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you so much, Gail. Kia ora koutou, ko Claire Mann toku ingoa, ko Rotorua aho, ki Wellington ana. My name is Claire Mann, and I, as Gail said, I'm joining you all from Wellington. I'm from Rotorua, which is a small town in regional rural New Zealand. And I'm really delighted to be here today. Thank you so much for the invitation. I want to just begin by telling you a little bit about myself and my background to orientate some of what I want to talk to you about. And then I've been asked to talk about some of my perspectives on achievements for advocacy and human rights, particularly in the UN system, and then also opportunities. So I've got some thoughts that I'd like to share with you all there. But first of all, I want to just say it's such a pleasure for me to be able to address you all and to join you in your conference here. The role of rural women is absolutely fundamental in my life and in my advocacy work as well. And so that's why it's such a special pleasure for me to be here. So my career, as Gail kindly set out, has mostly been international. I've lived and worked in Switzerland, in Geneva, for 15 years, and before that in Australia and elsewhere in the world, and for the last few years back home in New Zealand, based both in rural New Zealand and then also in the major city. But my background is I come from a farming family. My family is 4 generations now of farmers. I'm the 4th generation. There are others after me. So in total, 6 generations of people living in rural regional New Zealand. And so I know firsthand what it's like to encompass some of the struggles that women working in rural areas face. And of course, in New Zealand, we are much more privileged than many of our counterparts and our peers in many other parts of the Pacific. But there's some synergies there and some lessons to learn. In my work internationally, I've worked with lots of world leaders and experts, particularly around issues to do with food and agricultural systems, food sustainability. I've written a book on the right to food with the former UN Special Rapporteur on the right to food. And I worked with the first UN Special Rapporteur on the right to food, going on country missions around the world to see how does the right to food get implemented. And of course, that actually involves a lot of working with grassroots farmers, rural communities, the National Farmers Federations, governments and ministers, so all the way through the spectrums of society to make sure that we are addressing human rights at every level of our concerns. And one of the key themes throughout that work and the other work I've done on issues such as the right to health and housing and other areas of human rights has been that at the heart, at the core, is women. At the core of who suffers the most from human rights violations, and at the core of who holds the key to unlocking a better future for all of us, the answer is always women. And you all know that. So some of what I would like to talk about is what have we already been able to achieve in terms of human rights, particularly in international advocacy? And I know that your organisation has such a solid presence internationally in being able to take those grassroots concerns, the concerns of everyday women working and living in rural communities, and ensuring that those advocacy voices are heard. And I know that those advocacy voices are heard by national governments. They're heard in the halls of power at the United Nations. I see it in the CEDAW sessions and the Committee on the Elimination of All Forms of Violence Against Women. I see it at the CSW sessions, but I also see it in some other forums which maybe for a lot of us are not front of mind and might sometimes slip under the radar. So just as an example, I've seen the voices of rural women and women who have particular concerns about the struggles that they face in working in the rural sector. in international negotiations around what's called the Declaration on the Rights of Peasants. Now, this may sound a little bit strange and unusual to many of us, particularly from English-speaking countries, this concept of people living in rural areas being called peasants, and it might even feel a little bit insulting when we think about, to me, the idea of a peasant brings back images of medieval feudal times. But in fact, this movement, which was led by the civil society organization La Via Campesina and many others, came from a Francophone and a Hispanophone world, so from the Spanish-speaking and French-speaking parts of the world, where the concept of peasant is actually quite a broad and overarching, and encompasses many of the concerns and the issues that are that affect those of us working on the land, working in rural communities, working in where fishing is the primary source of production as well. And in this debate and negotiation here, this was something which my former boss, the first UN Special Rapporteur on the Right to Food, initiated at the UN Human Rights Council, and one of my colleagues led the drafting process with civil society and with governments around the world to draft a new declaration, which was adopted by the General Assembly in 2018, which addresses the importance of prioritising the rights of those living and working in rural areas and those who maintain their living from the land. So there's some really interesting developments in terms of advocacy and the ways in which rights are protected. And some of those might be a little bit outside of the realm of what we normally think about. There's also some really interesting developments when it comes to how the UN is engaging with those of us in the Pacific area. So an example of this was a couple of years ago, 2019, the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child. So this is a committee that's very similar to CEDAW, works in the same way. It is a treaty monitoring body monitoring the implementation of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Instead of just sitting in Geneva and having governments and NGOs come to it in Geneva, they made a special session where they came to Samoa, and they came all the way out to the Pacific and held their session for Samoa in country. And what this meant was it was a fantastic opportunity for all sectors of society to come and have their voice heard in person and to be able to present their issues and concerns in person. This was the first time that one of the UN treaty bodies had done that, and certainly based on the success that it had, we're hoping that it's not the last time and that this can be something that gets repeated in other instances. In terms of what the opportunities are there for advocacy, there's these traditional means that we have to advocate for our issues in the UN system through bodies like CEDAW, but seeing the treaty bodies coming out and seeing people in person gives some really interesting thought for how we could use those opportunities in the future. In a similar vein, there are many different parts nationally in our domestic systems. There are many different people that we can engage with and make sure are aware of our issues. And I know that your organizations already do this quite successfully. As an example of this, over the last few years, I've spent most of my time living in my hometown of Rotorua. And on one occasion last year, I coordinated and facilitated a visit by the New Zealand Commissioner on Equal Opportunities, so a member of the New Zealand Human Rights Commission, to come to Rotorua to meet with all sorts of different sectors of the community there, looking at issues around homelessness, looking at issues around child poverty, but also looking at the issue of rural women. And I was really absolutely delighted to be able to facilitate a meeting between our local organisation, our local rural women's branch, and you'll forgive me for not remembering the exact name of it properly, and the New Zealand Commissioner on Equal Opportunities, to be able to highlight to her some of the unique problems and situations that rural women face, both in employment and in life. And so now when the Commissioner is doing her work on addressing the gender pay gap, the race pay gap in New Zealand, she's also able to think about what does this mean for rural women? What does it mean for women working and living in the rural sector? And just as an example of this, some of the things that I know are familiar to many of you, but come as sometimes the people living in cities or coming from different perspectives don't quite understand. One of the things that I was able to talk to her about and help her to understand was the fact that for many of you all, that interlinkage between work, your place of work, your place of living, your employees and the places that they live and where they work, or if you're an employee yourself, the fact that you are living on your employer's property in their home in terms of their larger home space, as well as that being a workplace, that this brings up some pretty unique and interesting challenges for many people. And that's something which somebody living in a city just really had no concept of, had never considered or thought about when it comes to that employment relationship and some of the issues that arise from that. So that ability to actually just get people out to see what your life is like, what some of those challenges are. I've benefited immensely from the amazing women in my life who have been able to take their stories of what it's like to be working in the ways that they work and living in the ways that they live to these other forums. So, for example, in New Zealand and in Australia, I've seen many instances, whether it's the Country Women's Association in Australia or the Rural Women's Network in New Zealand, coming to larger events in the cities to tell us even just the stories of how long it took you to travel to get there that day helps to highlight some of the inequalities and some of the issues that we're dealing with. So what does this also mean in terms of what are the opportunities that there are? I think that there's some other opportunities here when it comes to UN experts. When we often think of the UN as this thing which is out there somewhere, not really all that connected to what's happening on the ground, but the way in which some UN experts are able to highlight the issues that are relevant to us, protect us as human rights defenders, as women, as feminists, as people who are speaking up, can be really important. So just as an example, over the weekend, I had contact with a friend of mine who is doing who is from the Sikh community in India and is working with Sikhs United, which is an international NGO focused on the issues relevant to the Sikh community. And he was particularly concerned and wanted to raise with me the issues of the Sikh farmers in India and the protests that they are undertaking at the moment, and the fact that many of them are being killed for protesting the issues that are relevant to farmers in India. You know, this is happening in our own region. I know this conference is about the Pacific, but I think that Asia is also within our realm of areas that we're very much concerned about. So one of the suggestions that I gave to him was to get in contact with the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Defenders and raise the issue of farmers being killed for standing up for their rights or being at risk of reprisals for standing up for their rights. And he was really, how do I do that? You know, the UN sounds like I don't know how to approach that system. And we worked together to, one of the things I was trying to help to facilitate was to say it's as easy as tweeting or going to their Facebook page and writing a post or sending an email. It doesn't have to be any big formal submission. It can simply be tweeting at the UN Special Rapporteur to say, hey, there's an issue here. We've got concerns we want to raise. You can send out your concerns in an email and send that through. And the impact that has in terms of the advocacy that they're then able to do on your behalf to raise those concerns and issues with national governments, to incorporate them into international law that governments then need to comply with. So, for example, the ability to incorporate them into things like the UN Declaration on the Rights of Peasants and thinking about how to incorporate them into the international legal standards about women, making sure that the voice of rural women is heard in those debates and dialogues, that can be incredibly powerful because we then get to use that in our advocacy. We then get to go to our governments and say, look, here it is. It's in law. We now need to do it. It's not just a feel-good thing. It's not just something that you do because you think it will make you look good or because you're getting pressure from civil society, but it's an actual legal obligation. And that has a lot of power and a lot of weight. So I want to just end on saying, so those are some of the opportunities I see institutionally for how we can work. But in terms of operationally, more from an attitude perspective, one of the things that I've learned in my career, and the thing that I'm always impressed about with organizations like yours, is that advocacy, at the heart of it, it's about persistence. And it's about that dedication to turning up day after day, doing the small incremental bits to have your voice heard, to ensure that your voice is not forgotten, so that we can eventually create the change that we want to create. And over time, that change, it's like the little drip that slowly drips and drips and drips and ends up creating quite a big hole. And that's what we can do. Hopefully not creating holes, but rather filling them up with rights implementation. I think some of the what we need as advocates is creativity in what we do and thinking a bit outside the box. So looking at systems or things like a convention or a declaration on the rights of peasants and thinking that doesn't sound like it's relevant to us, but let's dig deeper and see, are there opportunities here for us for how it could be useful for our work, our advocacy, or are there ways that this is relevant to us, or how can we get our voice heard here? I think one of the lessons that I've always really used in my own advocacy is the power of working in coalition and in partnership with others, and understanding the political leverage points. And we have a really interesting opportunity here in New Zealand at the moment with the current government that's very committed to gender equality and women's empowerment. And so when we have these political openings, it provides a really great leverage point. And then finally, the last little bit of advice or experience sharing, really, because I don't need to advise you all, you know how to do it, but just sharing my own experience, is that for me, advocacy and opportunities for progressing women's rights issues is absolutely has to be intersectional, and it's so much more powerful when we include young women and women of all different identities in that fight and in that struggle. And I think of it, I'm not sure if many of you have seen that image, which is often shared around Facebook, of women pulling each other up the ladder. So making sure that when we are advocating for our own issues, we're also creating the space and providing the opportunities to ensure that girls and young women come along and share their own stories, which may be different from ours, and get an opportunity to learn and access to those forums to do advocacy as well. So that's it from me. I'm really happy to take questions, and I just want to say a very happy International Women's Day. Congratulations on the work you're doing, and wish you a very productive and successful conference today.
No questions are coming through yet, Claire. You have obviously covered everything beautifully. No, they're still not coming through. But I would really like to thank you sincerely on behalf of everybody listening, and from those who will be watching this at a later date who couldn't join us today, for your words today. So you're so enthusiastic, and you can see that you really do love what you are doing for women in the world. And including younger women as well. We all have to do that and teach them to stand up for themselves and better themselves. Your past positions have really given you, I think, the passion for what you are doing now. And thank you for your thoughts and showing us ideas and how we can improve more, and your advocacy. Sorry,
There's one question.
for better women and children. There is one question's come up now.
What was the motivator to begin?
Thanks, Gail. I'd be delighted to answer that question. So the question is, what was your motivator to begin your advocacy work? That's a great question. I think, like a lot of people, it came from a great upbringing in that sense of duty to community and duty to making sure that others are not left behind. I was raised Catholic, although I am no longer at all religious. And one of the main tenets that I think I did take away, and that I did still, that was really instilled in me in that upbringing, was that idea of doing unto others as you would have them do to you. And so for me, that sense of social justice was something that I got right from an early age. And I also think that some of that sense of justice comes from when there are instances in your own life when those things are not being adhered to, right? My upbringing was not necessarily 100% perfect. And there were instances where I had to fight for my own rights, or where I didn't feel empowered to protect myself or to fight for my own rights. And so that led me to making sure that I used my own education to kind of give back and contribute. Some of it came from seeing, you know, the work that I'm talking to you all about was seeing the challenges that women in my family had in living and working in rural communities. My grandmother's diaries were the subject of an exhibition at our local museum on pioneer settler women, and the really interesting aspect. You know, so often we hear about the farmers, we hear about the men, the work that they do, the difficulties they have, the efforts that they put in, which are important and valuable. But the women, their stories are not the ones that are heard. So seeing and hearing my grandmother's stories and the stories of other women in my family made it really important to me to make sure that our voices, our stories as women are heard. And for people like me who are in a position of privilege and who have the education and the access to some of these forms of power, it's so important to me to make sure that it's not just me speaking on behalf of other people, but actually I'm giving the space and stepping aside and providing the space for those women who absolutely have their own voices. They just don't often have access to the ability to be heard. And so that, I think, is a really important lesson for all of us.
Thank you. And a message, a question has come through from Rural Women New Zealand saying they want to work with you. So I'm sure they'll contact you after this today. We've also got people in Papua New Guinea in and watching us, and from Kiribati. So no more questions for Claire. I really would like to thank you, Claire, again, on behalf of all of us for giving your time today. And we have a small gift for you that will be in the mail as on my way home. So thank you again. We really do appreciate it. We can't give you a clap, but that's going on all around the world.
Thank you all. Good luck for your conference today.
Thank you very much. And Nick is now going to put on an International Women's Day video for us.
For the past year, we have faced the huge global challenge of the COVID-19 pandemic. With the arrival of vaccines, we are seeing the situation slowly improve, but we must not allow COVID to be an excuse for the lack of progress on helping the most vulnerable in our societies. The pandemic has highlighted inequalities, and our governments must seize the opportunity to address them. More than any time in recent history, we have an opportunity to build back better.
Ultimately, women carry the burden of keeping on. All over the world, while conflicts rage and economic uncertainty increases, women continue to work, keeping homes, raising families, and building communities. In many places, they are standing up. Women determined to influence policy are raising their voices, and organizations like ACWW are working to uplift them, to give them the platform to voice their concerns, address the injustices they face, and work together toward a better future. As the world celebrates, ACWW highlights the unmet challenges and urges you to remain rural women in action.
ACWW has been amplifying the voices of rural women for more than 90 years. Now, as we look towards the next 90 years, we want you to stand with us. Whether you are an individual who recognizes the important role of the rural woman, or a group who wants to be heard locally, nationally, internationally, you can join ACWW and you add your voice to us. Together, we are stronger, and together, we are rural women in action.
For more information about the international and local work of ACWW, please visit our website at www.acww.org.uk. You can join us using an easy online form or by contacting ACWW Central Office. You can also donate on the website and support our 2021 appeal to secure ACWW for future generations. Thank you for helping us celebrate, and I wish you all the most inspiring of International Women's Days.
So hello again, and it was lovely to hear that, and I hope you have all written down your how to contact head office. I'd now like to introduce you to our Chief Executive Officer in head office, Tish Collins. Tish is going to give us a report on the central office, what's been happening at central office, which has been very different for the past year. Over to you, Tish.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, and for inviting me to give the report from ACWW Central Office. After a marvellous 29th Triennial World Conference in Melbourne, a new board was elected, including new world president, Mogdi de Kock from South Africa, who had previously served 2 terms as chairman of the Communications and Marketing Committee. The board reaffirmed the tagline, Rural Women in Action, and declared our diversity is our strength. Sadly, there have been some changes to the board, including the resignation of Treasurer Ruth Cargill from Australia in July 2020, and the passing of our projects chairman, Mabel Moyo, from Zimbabwe in September that same year. The board decided that the Deputy President, Alison Burnett, should become acting treasurer for the remainder of the triennium, and Edwina Marr from Northern Ireland should be co-opted as chairman of the projects committee. The resignation of Anthea Grobler as area president for Southern Africa resulted in Dr. Marina Muller from Namibia being co-opted to the board in that capacity. Sadly, the board took the difficult decision to remove the area president for Central and South Asia after a significant breach of data protection procedures. The vacancy this created led to the world president taking responsibility for that area for the remainder of the triennium. There have been a few changes of central office staff too. Susan Williams joined as part-time finance manager in September 2019 and is supported by finance assistant Becky Ramsey. Jenny Sellers joined as projects administrator the same month as Victoria Dimitrova went back to studying for her master's degree. Monica Tomlins, office assistant, also left us after a short-term contract. Rowan McKinnon joined us as office administrator in September 2020 after Jess Green moved out of London. The remaining staff, Nick Newland, Sydney Salter and myself, are all multitasking and taking on responsibility for a variety of areas of work. Nick is our policy and communications manager and chief privacy officer. In addition to being the administrator for the Triennial World Conference and the United Nations committees, he is the lead on policy and advocacy work, writes speeches and statements, and represents ACWW as appropriate at meetings of the UN and its agencies. He manages our communications, designs and creates the website and the wonderful videos you see. Sydney is working under Nick as Countrywoman editor and is handling much of our social media output on Facebook. She is also administrator for the Agriculture Committee and works with Jenny on projects with particular responsibility for donor engagement. We have installed a new IT system and outsourced the IT support. The plan to replace the office computers was brought forward to enable the staff to work from home on the new network once the global pandemic hit and London went into lockdown in March 2020. There were 17 resolutions passed at the 30th Triennial World Conference. And soon after, we got down to work on producing resources for members to use as they take action on the resolutions agreed. Focusing on one resolution moved by members in the South Pacific, ACWW has partnered with the Global Alliance for Rabies Control to help members learn more about rabies and how to mitigate its spread in rural communities. Free online training for our members educates and equips them to make real measurable progress in their communities. Sadly, the uptake on this training has been very poor, and we would love to see more members, particularly from the area that proposed the resolution, take this free training and strengthen their communities. Please visit the website for more information. Nick designed and created a new website, which launched just after the Triennial World Conference and is updated most days. It has a vast quantity of information, posters, videos, and PowerPoint presentations with speakers' notes. You can even find nearly 10 years of back numbers of the Countrywoman magazine in digital format for you to read, share, or download. The appearance of COVID-19 and its development into a global pandemic has significantly changed the way ACWW works. We're now having more meetings, but they are all conducted via video conferencing. The South Pacific is making history by hosting the first ever digital area conference, opening a new chapter in the ACWW story. The impact on ACWW's membership has been addressed via 3 surveys, the results of which have been shared with UNESCO. We found the so-called lockdown has increased rural isolation and made access to food and banking facilities even more of an issue for our members globally, particularly so as public transport has been curtailed. Additionally, the forced cancellation of meetings for member societies and support groups has resulted in a fall of membership income and donations. The board has taken steps by drawing down some of the temporary reserves in order to meet commitments for the year and to launch an appeal of members to safeguard ACWW for the future. We will continue to respond flexibly to the world situation and do our best to ensure our membership continue to be supported, well represented and heard. ACWW's ultimate goal is the empowerment of rural women and their communities, and this is addressed by what we call advocacy, friendship, partnership, learning from each other, and local activities. On the advocacy front, there have been great strides over the last 3 or 4 years, re-establishing ACWW's role as an international non-governmental organisation. ACWW carries forward information from our members to provide the UN systems, surveys and meetings with that information. Our representatives take every opportunity to engage with these systems and amplify the voices of our membership. We also complete the cycle by passing information from the UN back to the members. In March 2020, we were preparing to attend the 64th Commission on the Status of Women at the United Nations in New York, a most important part of the ACWW annual calendar. As news of the pandemic spread, we started to cancel meetings, and the World President and UN Committee Chairman, Marie Kenny, arrived in London, only to turn around and go home again a week later. However, we made good use of that time in London, creating videos and meeting up with the Women's Institute in Essex to display and film our stunningly wonderful International Beijing Plus 25 banner, which was to have accompanied us to New York. Panels were contributed by members from each of our 9 areas, including 2 from Australia, made by Ruth Shanks, past president, and one from Rural Women New Zealand. In 2019, ACWW participated in the 72nd session of the Convention for the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, commonly known as CEDAW. Here, there was an examination of the UK. We held a consultation with member societies and individuals, and based on this, prepared a written statement reflecting the reality of life for rural women in all 4 nations of the UK. We were then asked to give verbal evidence directly to the committee, and in the concluding observations, there was a strong statement finding the UK in breach of the convention and some specific commentary and recommendations on rural women. When the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, were agreed and the 2030 Agenda was launched in 2015, governments committed to the High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development, known as HLPF. Normally held at UN headquarters in New York, each year sees around 40 governments present voluntary national reviews. This is an important process as it allows governments to update the UN on progress towards achieving the SDGs and allows input from NGOs, so organisations like ACWW can bring the voices of their members to the discussion and hold governments to account in front of all UN member states. Thus, in the cases of Lesotho and New Zealand, in July 2019, ACWW actually presented questions and a statement on behalf of our members during the voluntary national reviews. The videos of these presentations can be found on our website. In 2020, this was conducted digitally, and ACWW presented the official response of the gathered NGOs during the session on COVID-19 and opportunities to build back better. This also can be found on the website. In 2020, ACWW once again participated in the 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence, commonly known as the Orange the World campaign, to raise awareness of the International Observance Day for the elimination of violence against women and the campaign to end gender-based violence. The vision of the campaign is to show violence against women is a violation of human rights. In the 16 days of 2019, when we turned our website and Facebook orange, more than 63,500 people saw ACWW's materials online, and nearly 900 people actively shared these materials on their own Facebook pages. ACWW has pledged to support the UN Decade of Family Farming, joining the global campaign to ensure that rural women are empowered to improve global food systems, ultimately making sure you always have good food, nutritious food on your plate, and global hunger is eradicated. Reflecting our strapline, ACWW Rural Women in Action, a pack of resources was produced for members, including 100 Ways You Can Make a Difference. These are attractive booklets, posters, and stickers, which are also available as a download from our website. The pack can be sent to you, and there are videos exploring the contents, one of which you will see today. In line with ACWW policy objectives, partnerships were established beyond consultative status with a number of agencies. In particular, the UNESCO NGO Liaison Committee, where we have now been elected to the organising committee representing all NGOs engaged with UNESCO. The other major element of our work is funding small-scale community projects, primarily in developing countries, from donations made by members all over the world, which prioritise grants that relate to the SDGs. We fund both member and non-member societies. The benefit is generally far wider than the direct project participants and will often include family members and even whole communities. Since the start of this triennium, the Women Empowered Fund received sufficient donations to fund 55 projects. The average size of the project grant was £4,044 and covered projects in all 6 areas of the Women Empowered Fund. Members are sent the Countrywoman magazine 4 times per year. All magazines from 2011 onwards have been added to the website as an accessible digital archive. During 2020, only 1 issue of the magazine was printed and posted out to members because of COVID-19, but the other 3 issues were sent via email links to all members and are available on the website. As a cost-cutting measure, the board decided that for 2021, the first issue would be posted. It's on its way to you now. Issues 2 and 3 would be digital, and the fate of issue 4 would be decided in June. Meanwhile, there is a consultation taking place with members about how they would like to see the Countrywoman in years to come. The magazine and the website provide a wealth of shared information on relevant issues, keeping members and the public in touch with the organisation, its policies and activities. And also you'll find the full trustees' annual report and accounts. There's a summary on the website and in the magazine, and the full document is available on request. In addition to publishing statements on key issues throughout the year, there has been a World President's monthly newsletter to all members, which more recently has taken the form of a monthly live public broadcast of her afternoon tea to keep members informed. Women Walk the World was started 7 years ago to bring members together in fellowship and raise awareness of ACWW. This has also developed into a major fundraiser. Normally held on or around ACWW Day, 29th of April, because of the global pandemic restrictions, it was rescheduled in 2020 to coincide with the International Day of Rural Women on 15th of October. The winning photograph was from Romania this year and earned its place on the front cover of the Countrywoman. In 2019, the front cover was dedicated to those refugee, IDP, and stateless women who have no choice but to walk the world. I am proud to say that since we all last met in Melbourne, ACWW has proven it truly is rural women in action. Thank you. I look forward to answering questions if there are any.
Thank you, Tish. And if anybody's putting any questions up, I'd also like to tell you that we have a video on rural women in action packs and also projects. So contact head office if you'd like to get any of those packs. They really are great.
This Rural Women in Action pack was designed to help our supporters and members really engage with the work of ACWW. With this pack, you can actively contribute to the success of ACWW's aims and the Sustainable Development Goals. It is also a tool to help bring others along on your journey and explain to them how and why ACWW works. In this video, we walk you through what's included in the action pack and how to use it.
The first thing you'll see when you open your action pack is this green booklet. It's important that you read this first, as it gives context for the whole pack and will help you understand how you can work with your sisters all over the world. As you read, you'll find out more about 3 priorities that summarize our work and help focus our actions. Read carefully, and do note that on the back you'll see our contact details. Use these to contact us to chat about the action pack, order more, or give feedback.
You will find the 100 Ways You Can Make a Difference booklet. We are often asked, but what can I do? This booklet is a handy guide to your personal commitment to global change. Please read it through and start to make small changes or small actions in your everyday life. There are 10 sections. Please fill it in and send it back to us at Central Office. We will send you a certificate and use the booklets to inform ACWW's advocacy work.
Under the 100 Ways booklet, you will find 2 more. One, in blue, is CEDAW, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. It is the complete text of the treaty, the rights guaranteed to all women globally. As well as the full treaty, and in particular Article 14, which covers rural women, you will find a list of countries who have signed and ratified the treaty in the back, as well as those who haven't. This is a really handy guide. You will also find the white Global Goals booklet. This is ACWW's introduction to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or 2030 Agenda. Each goal is explored in detail and gives you an idea of how you can make a difference in sustainable development.
Here are a series of posters that can be used to communicate the message of ACWW through community message boards, signs in coffee shops, and the windows of local businesses, or used as a visual aid during talks. These CEDA posters can be used in schools with permission to help young women learn about their rights that are protected in international laws. This chart is included as a visual representation of ACWW's place in the United Nations system. It is not intended to be used as a poster since its print is so small, but it is an explanatory tool to help better understand and communicate how ACWW amplifies the voice of rural women.
Here are 3 more posters. 1, looking at our work with the Global Alliance for Rabies Control to eradicate dog-mediated rabies by 2030. And 2 general posters about ACWW with a request to join us. You can use these when giving talks or to encourage your local group to participate in ACWW activities.
For at least the last 3 years, we've been getting requests for stickers, so here they are. Use them however you see fit to spread the word about ACWW. We've had one member say that she is using her stickers for her Women Walk the World event, and another say that she's passing them out to the children's group she works with. Feel free to let us know if you need some more.
Finally, you'll see here a request to help us cover the cost of producing and mailing this pack. ACWW's work is vital, but producing these materials for advocacy comes at a cost. Any contribution towards Pennies for Friendship to help us continue our work is appreciated, and the suggested donation of £7 is very welcome. As you use the resources contained in this pack, please don't forget to keep us updated and let us know how it has helped you get involved with the work of ACWW. ACWW was founded on the idea that rural women working together can change the world. Let us therefore continue to be rural women in action.
Thank you for that presentation, Nick. It really is a great pack. I can recommend it to all of you. And I'm now going to invite Tish back again. First of all, the next South Pacific Area Conference. Where will that be, please?
So we only received one bid to host the next ACWW South Pacific Area Conference, and this came from Griffith, New South Wales, of the CWA of the New South Wales, Australia. Because of this, we will be delighted to accept their bid and look forward to a wonderful event in happier times, joining our colleagues in Griffith.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. So we will see you all in 2024, hopefully, in Griffith. Could we have another video, Nick, please, on the income generating projects?
My name is Victoria and I joined ACWW in September 2017.
Can you tell us a bit about income generation projects? What are they?
So in income generation projects in ACWW, as part of our criteria, we have 3 points: small business initiatives, revolving loan schemes, and business skills development. This means that ideally a good income generation project would have different parts within it. One of them would be vocational training of some sort. It would be, for example, sewing, or it will be a different type of boots making vocational training. It will also have financial literacy aspect so that it guarantees their success and sustainability in future. A different part of an income generation project is a revolving loan fund. Within this revolving loan fund, we expect them to get the initial capital investment they need to start their own business and then start paying it back eventually when they have enough income. The first question, and the most important one that we ask as part of an income generation project monitoring, is if there is a revolving loan included within it, do the beneficiaries understand how this revolving loan works? Do they understand how much they have to pay back every month or every year? Do they understand what is their responsibility towards this revolving loan? Another important question that we ask as part of our monitoring routine is what does the group do in order to guarantee that the revolving loan has been recouping its funds and redistributing them back to beneficiaries? What mechanisms do they have to guarantee that this is happening? A third question, which I could give as an example, is how do the beneficiaries plan to apply their new skills to their current or future employment? We ask, do they know what they have as new skills and what they have developed throughout the project? And do they know how these skills are going to be useful for them in the future? Where and how will the products made by the beneficiaries be sold? And this is important because we want to see whether the beneficiaries have thought through the process of developing their own business properly. Do they know whether there is a demand for their product? And if they know that there is a demand, have they thought at what price they're going to sell it? And is this going to be feasible for the inputs they have to fund for the sustainability of their project afterwards? The input of local communities is really important because what we want to see is initiative from within. We want to see what these women want to do and what they think would be feasible within their communities. We don't want to be the ones to go there and tell them that there is an opportunity that they're not seeing. We want them to show initiative. We want them to be the first ones to come to us and say, we have a plan, we're going to implement it in this way, and would you be willing to fund this initiative? This approach is likely to translate into a bottom-up development within the community. ACWW believes this to be the most sustainable way to fund projects.
Introduce you to Lynn, who a lot of you, I'm sure, have seen and know. And Lynn's going to talk you through a presentation on Girls Are Our Future.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us all here today. It's my honour to be here with you with our Girls Are the Future PowerPoint display. The UN Decade of the Family states that the key element of keeping agriculture viable and sustainable is ensuring new generations of family farmers. This means giving girls equal opportunities to inherit and use the family farms. It means giving access to education, especially agricultural education, that follows them to make their rightful place on farms in the agricultural economy. Rural girls face barriers that keep them from reaching their full potential, including lack of access to education, outdated inheritance laws, lack of decision-making power, unequal access to resources and financing, and a lack of access to maternal and reproductive health care. These are the basic and fundamental needs that need to be addressed at this point before the girls have their equal participation in communities. The last statistic on this slide is bleak and may come as a shock to many of us. It shows that if we don't invest in the mental and reproductive health of girls and give them access to education, they may not be able to participate in the future that we are all working so hard to secure for them. While much of the responsibility of empowering rural girls is to pursue the education and it lies within the governments, there are still things that we can do in our own communities to address this most fundamental issue that keeps girls from reaching their full potential. Rural girls suffer from restricted access when it comes to participation in agriculture. Do the women farmers in your area suffer from lack of resources and financing? These are all things that we need to do to make sure that we lobby our local government to be aware of discriminatory legislation and make sure that ACWW is aware as well. The aspect of protecting the future of our rural girls involves protecting their access to healthcare, and especially sexual and reproductive healthcare. One of our resolutions in this conference was all about reproductive healthcare, and it's really important that this is addressed through all aspects of rural life and through all sexes as well. ACWW needs our support to empower young women and girls. Supporting younger women in our communities is a vital part to empower these women. It is crucial that older women lobby and secure the rights for healthcare and education for younger women for themselves so that the next generation has control over their future and their own decisions. You can donate to the Women Empowerment Fund, the WE Fund, education and capacity building to help fund educations for women around the world are part of the WE Fund. So please, if you can, help commit and remember education is power. Power is knowledge. Knowledge makes everybody so much stronger in their communities. Thank you.
Knowledge is power. Remember that. That's so important. I'm now going to ask Tish to come back on and announce there were 4 resolutions put forward this conference, and Tish has the societies went online to vote on these, and I'm going to ask Tish now to give us the results of those 4 resolutions. Thank you, Tish.
Okay. Resolution 1, rural proofing. That the Associated Women of the World urge governments to apply a rural impact analysis to all decision processes to ensure that all rural voices are included. This was moved by Fiona Gower, seconded by Anne Irving. This was passed unanimously with no votes against. Resolution 2, gender proofing. That Associated Women of the World urge governments to apply a gender analysis tool alongside the rural proofing guidelines to ensure that the intersectionality of being women and living rurally are taken into account in policy and lawmaking. Proposed by Fiona Gower, seconded by Anne Irving. This was passed unanimously with no votes against. Resolution 3, family planning. that ACWW urge all governments to take effective steps to promote information and education on the possibilities of family planning and to provide family planning education and facilities for all men, women and children with special emphasis on men. This was proposed by Country Women's Association of New South Wales, seconded by PNG Women's Association of New South Wales. This was passed unanimously with no votes against. And the fourth resolution, immunisation, that ACWW urged the World Health Organization and other relevant UN bodies to provide developing countries with increased awareness and education on immunisation, B, to encourage more research into vaccines and the resources to fight disease through immunisation, C, adopt more feasible methods of vaccine mass production and train and provide health workers to administer immunisation projects. Proposed by PNG Women's Association of New South Wales, seconded Country Women's Association of New South Wales. This was passed unanimously with no votes against. That's all the resolutions.
Thank you, Tish. I will now ask somebody please online to move that, if you so wish, that those 4 resolutions go onto the World Conference agenda for 2023. Names coming in. I need a mover and a seconder. Ronnie Dunstan, New South Wales. Kerry who?
Kerry, I need your
Kerry,
details,
where are you
please.
from?
Kerry?
Members to be able to.
Kerry Smith.
Kerry Smith. Rural Women New Zealand. So thank you. And I don't think anybody could possibly vote against those.
You need to, what's the process for members to be able to put these resolutions together?
You can put them to your local, the question, how can you put these resolutions to your local governments? You can do that now, saying it's coming from the South Pacific Area Conference. When they go on to the World Conference, if it's passed there, you are then going back to your government saying that this was passed at a World Conference. So it won't hurt to do it twice. I will now invite our World President to address us again with just a few concluding remarks. Thank you, Mogdi.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gail. It seems we now come to the end of a very interesting area conference. And Gail, to you and your members and everyone involved in conducting this first ever virtual area conference, I want to ensure you I did not mind at all to spend midnight and a few of the very early hours of this morning of this Monday here where I am in your company. It was a privilege indeed to spend time with you and your members. I wish you all the best when I leave you with a reminder to seize all opportunities to celebrate your achievements. And with that, I say goodbye.
Thank you again, Madam World President, for your lovely remarks. It's time for me now to close off, and I would first of all like to explain what I'm wearing. You can't see very much of it, but because we couldn't meet in Papua New Guinea, I do have the Papua New Guinean Mary dress on. So, and we've also put a little scarf down the side of our South Pacific area banner to try to bring in Papua New Guinea and as you heard at the very beginning, the beautiful, beautiful anthem of Papua New Guinea. So I sincerely hope that you have all enjoyed this conference and learned more about ACWW. 2.5 hours on a screen versus 3 to 4 days and face-to-face conference is very strange. It's been very difficult and possibly very difficult for a lot of you to log on and continue to stay connected to a Zoom conference. And for me personally, being the guinea pig with the first online conference for ACWW has been a massive learning curve. Before closing the Zoom conference, I would like to thank the following people. Mrs. Lynn Braco for joining me here today and helping, and for taking the minutes that will go out to all societies sometime in the near future. These minutes are being recorded and will possibly and will go on the website as well, if that's what you would like. To the World President, I again thank you, Mogni, for joining with us, for opening the conference and for your encouraging talks. To Ms. Claire Mann, what a guest speaker. Oh, thank you so much. That was so enlightening. To our CEO, Tish Collins, thank you for your recording and reporting on head office and for announcing the results of the voting that was conducted online. And dear Nick, how can I thank you for all the behind the scenes work you've done for us and for me especially. Nick set all this up and has guided Lynn and myself through this conference. Thank you isn't enough. However, it will have to do for now. And from all of us, a big thank you, Nick. I wish to let all members know that I have gifts for the 5 people I've just thanked on your behalf. They will be in the post to these people. However, I can give Lynn hers here in front of you all so that you know there is something
Thank you.
in the bags.
Thank you very much.
I would also like to express my thanks to the June EX Services Memorial Club for letting me use their equipment and excellent facilities for this conference. I'm too far from town to successfully run this from my home Wi-Fi. And last, and certainly not least, to my husband, Peter, who supports me in everything I do. And I couldn't do what I do for ACWW or any other interests without his support. His encouragement and love. He does often come into the office though and says, what, not on that darn computer again? And honestly, I do spend many hours every day on it. If you have travelled today to join with friends, please travel safely home, and may God keep you all safe and well. Thank you, and I close this conference at 10 minutes past 12 Australian time. Thank you all, and we will be having the Song of Peace to go out with. Beautiful, beautiful words. Thank you, Nick.